Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. We'll give it a few seconds for everyone to enter into the participant. All right. As folks trickle in, we'll go over a little bit of housekeeping. So, seeing if you could advance to the next slide. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us to have a discussion around new perspectives in IPM. I'm Dr. Lakeisha Odom at the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research. I will go over a few intro slides and then turn everything over to our amazing panel today. So the first thing you might note is that during the first part of this dialogue, you will be muted, so please feel free to take advantage of the Q&A section and add any information in the chat that you would like or any questions in the Q&A section. We will make time for questions at the end of the presentation. The other thing of note is we will record and share this webinar with registrants via email, so if there's something that you were interested in or an interesting point that was made, those recordings will be made available to you. So that we can get into our amazing conversation, I'll give a quick overview of the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research, why we're so interested in this topic, and then I'll turn things over to our partners to have a conversation and start the dialogue. So if you don't mind, Karen. Is someone else getting an echo? Karen, are you getting an echo? Are we okay?
I can hear you okay.
Okay, thank you. So I'll quickly go through our introduction to the Foundation for Food and Ag Research for those that may be less familiar with us. We are created in the 2014 Farm Bill, independent 501c3, created to increase public ag research investment. We also look at innovative knowledge gaps, and we want to be complementary to USDA's research agenda. Since our inception in 2014, we have awarded over 450 grants with over $800 million awarded and matched with 550 or more distinct partners. We do research across 4 priority areas. One is cultivating thriving production systems that includes crop and animal production systems, bolstering healthy food systems, which looks at both urban agriculture as well as things around food access, food waste, food loss, sustaining vibrant agroecosystems, which looks at water and soil and ensuring resiliency in our agroecosystems. I do apologize. I'm going to try my best to get through mine quickly. There is a lot of background noise because I am not in a private space. I do apologize. And the last piece is strengthening workforce. I'll get through my 2 slides very quickly, and hopefully the background noise will decrease. Next slide, please. So a main reason that we are looking at ways in which we can be complementary to, a main reason that FFAR's research is so innovative is that we complement USDA's research agenda. We look to fill critical knowledge gaps. We increase public-private research investment. We also focus on actionable science and involve farmers to resolve current challenges. The other thing that FFAR really looks at is moving research from the lab and into the field. So you can see why IPM might be an area of interest for us for all of these reasons. Next slide. So one of the reasons that FFAR is interested in supporting IPM is we recognize that in order to have effective resilient systems, IPM must be adoptable, profitable, and scalable. And we recognize that IPM should not be treated as a standalone topic. One of the things that we were most interested in engaging with our partners early on is recognizing that IPM is a cross-cutting strategy, and it intersects not just our interest in biology, but also our interest in innovation, and it's important to management. We recognize that sustainability and profitability can be addressed by having strong IPM practices, and we recognize the key role that IPM plays in enabling resilient systems-level agriculture. So that is what drew us to this relationship and wanting to work more closely with the IPM sector. I think I have one more slide. Yep. And so this is just a recognition that at FFAR we think that part of the reason why this is a critical area for us to explore is because it sits at that intersection of sustainability, profitability, resilience, and technical innovation, and all of those things are things that FAR prioritizes. I do apologize for the earlier disruption in sound. So we recognize that, but hopefully it's better now. We recognize that IPM needs to be a part of a systems approach. So we're not just looking at improving soil function. We're looking at not just pest control, but also improving soil function. We recognize that IPM has the potential to strengthen ecosystem services. It also contributes to water quality and environmental stewardship goals. So if you look at the priority areas that I identified on the previous slide, you'll see that IPM intersects with a number of our priority areas. We also recognize that IPM is an opportunity for technological innovations. It's an opportunity to help translate data into actionable decisions for farmers. And then we recognize that it's a frontline resilience strategy for producers. So as my final thought to couch this conversation is that IPM represents a systems level approach that integrates our FAR priorities across crop, animal, soil, water, land, food systems, and into a single actionable framework for sustainable production. And I'm so happy to turn things over to our moderator, Larry Elworth, in a moment, because I think the conversation today will really highlight the integral role that IPM has played and can play in future of resilient systems. So with that, I will turn things over to you, Larry.
Great. Thanks very much, Lakeisha. I appreciate that. And thank you to everyone who's joining us today. Just want to point out that this is the first in a series of 3 webinars that is looking at all of the latest developments, challenges, opportunities, and needs for research and application of IPM. These webinars are meant to serve as kind of a foundation for raising the issues and opportunities for a FAR-supported initiative, which we titled the IPM Alliance. Next slide, please. So the IPM Alliance is, as FAR would describe it, a co-designed public-private research collaboration. Over the past several months, we've worked with FAR, and we're very grateful for their support in looking at ways to both conduct and support new research that helps meet the needs both of ag producers and of their supply chains. So next slide, please, Tian. So the objectives of the IPM Alliance are fairly clear. I'll try not to just read what's on the screen for you. First of all, we recognize that there are genuine new needs and new challenges for pest management. And to deal with those, and you all on the call probably know more about them than I do, in order to deal with those challenges, we need new research and things from resistance management to dealing with new pests. And that we also are going to need new tools to deal with those challenges. So we want to make sure that there are opportunities to support research for biological and precision ag solutions, and for the integration of solutions across the board in managing pests in both crop and other agricultural settings. We also really want to be able to support not just the research, but also, as Lakeisha mentioned, the application of IPM tools in the field. And that's going to take new research, especially as we look at new technologies. And also, there are some substantial opportunities that we've identified that maybe many other people on the call have identified as well. The need to identify specific, effective ways to quantify the economic impact from IPM, both for ecosystem services, but also for risk management and financial opportunities as well. As we do this research, what we'd like to be able to do is create kind of a broader sense of support for IPM, to create more relevance for IPM through collaboration in the ag supply chains, but also, again, with financial and risk management opportunities. And finally, and I think this is the way it is for virtually all of the FAR public-private opportunities, we really think that there's a huge opportunity in this situation to leverage the public-private investment, and also by doing so, make more resources available that eventually gets down to the farmer level for them to adopt IPM. That, again, as Lakeisha mentioned, we want this not only to work in the field, but we also want it to be able to be economically and environmentally viable. So next slide, please. So what we're really hoping to do today, and again, this is the first in a series of webinars, is give some really smart people an opportunity to talk about the work that they've been doing in the latest development, new directions that they're taking on in their organizations or companies. And in the process of doing that, not only provide some examples of the kinds of work they're doing, but also begin to identify some new opportunities and needs for IPM research, which is, in the final analysis, what we hope to be able to do in establishing the IPM Alliance. So let's move on to the next slide, please, Tien. So I'm really happy to be on this webinar. I'd have joined it even if I weren't the moderator. Just the people involved in it, I'm just deeply grateful you're taking the time to do it, and I'm really excited to hear what you have to say. Karen Ross is Secretary of CDFA, California Department of Agriculture, and someone I've known for a very long time. And for Karen's benefit, I've known her since she was a small child. So we got together when she was very young. Shane Samples is doing an enormous amount of work in IPM and has huge amount of experience across the board in a variety of crops and cropping contexts. Katherine, in addition to being a smart person working on an incredible job with the United Soybean Board, is also from North Carolina. And so those of you who are from North Carolina, that's enough said, right? And Todd DeKryger is someone that I've had the privilege of working with for a number of years on IPM projects, both in Michigan and other places. And he just has such a wide range of experience, both in the context of the United States, but also because of Nestle's global reach. So with that, I'll turn it over to Karen, and just thank you all for being presenters on this.
Thanks, Larry. I have one slide because I have a lot of resources and I'm just here. I'm definitely not a scientist and I'm not a technical expert, but I think it's helpful, as my brother used to say, to know what California is up to and try to keep it in California for as long as possible. That's what he used to tell me every Sunday when I called to see how the farm was doing in Western Nebraska. I wanted to start by saying a lot of the work that has guided us here at the Department of Food and Agriculture for the past 15 years, while I have been secretary, has been around a strategic plan that was done with our State Board of Food and Agriculture starting in 2009 and updated about every 5 years. The vision is that California agriculture makes California a better place to live because of what we grow and how we grow it. In recognition of the ability to grow over 400 very diverse crops, many of them nutrient-dense foods that are important to the health of all people, regardless of where they live and where they come from. And also a recognition that we have a very stringent regulatory environment. And a lot of those regulations first started coming out of the Federal Clean Air Act, where we have delegated authorities, as well as the Clean Water Act, but also the way that we regulate pesticides and are the only state with a 100% use reporting system by all growers that's been mandated for over 40 years. So that's where I want to start, because I got my beginning with the Agricultural Council of California when IPM, as well as the Sustainable Ag Research and Education Program, were established at the University of California Ag and Natural Resources. And I think SAREP in particular, in this last couple of years under the new leadership, is a true example of a very integrated team approach around all the issues that are confronting, especially a focus on small and underserved populations in farming and farming communities around our food system and farming. I have to call out our SPM roadmap because we are trying to shift further into a holistic approach with a sustainable pest management roadmap that was developed by the Department of Pesticide Regulation, which is housed at our California Environmental Protection Agency, and the Department of Food and Agriculture. Our Undersecretary and 2 of our staff members served on a 2-year committee process that held lots of focus groups to develop the SPM roadmap. The primary goal of this roadmap is by 2050 to reduce or eliminate our use of high-risk pesticides. In the meantime, a committee is being established to identify what the metrics will be for establishing priority pesticides. As a person who runs the public programs that we do, our eradication programs for invasive pests are managed by the Department of Food and Agriculture and they all take place in urban and suburban communities. So we know from the front lines the challenges of going door to door to homeowners and asking for permission to put traps in their backyards, or to come in when pests or disease are established, to pull those trees out and to do treatment in those neighborhoods. We were the first to develop sterile insect technology over 30 years ago for the medfly. We used to fly helicopters spraying malathion over urban areas. And when I first moved to the state and got my first medfly infestation to go talk about in the Capitol, I realized very quickly you're not in Nebraska anymore, because Spray LA was not very popular for me to walk into Capitol offices to talk about. And that does drive a lot of our public policy, because our legislature is highly urbanized and very, very progressive. And that's established a lot of our environmental values that drive a lot of our other programs. We have an Office of Pesticide Consultation and Analysis that was established at the department when the pesticide program was moved out of the Department of Food and Agriculture to the Environmental Protection Agency under Pete Wilson's leadership. That office offers some small-scale grants, but they are very meaningful grants for biologically integrated farming systems, IR4 programs because of all of our specialty crops that are often orphans when it comes to pest management tools, and what we call adaptive or proactive IPM. And I think looking at that, you can see, had we had the funding for the biologically integrated farming systems program that actually started with funding from the legislature to UCANR and the IPM program over 25 years ago, that funding stopped over 15 years ago. Had we been able to continue that, I think we'd be in a much better place, because it is holistic. It can be on a regional basis and or on a commodity basis to bring farmers together with researchers and practitioners and our PCAs. Our pest consultants are extremely important sources of information that supplement the cooperative extension. We could have made a lot more progress than we already have. I also have our Office of Agricultural Resiliency and Sustainability, because when we talk about a holistic approach, regenerative agriculture, this is where all of our climate smart ag programs have been housed over the last decade. Over $700 million have been invested in climate smart agriculture at the department. That includes our livestock methane emission program reductions under dairy digesters and alternative manure management practices, our healthy soils program, and our on-farm water use efficiency program. All of those programs have reduced our greenhouse gas emissions by an estimated 30 million metric ton CO2 equivalents, and are saving 1.5 million acre feet of water. It's important for us to understand the co-benefits that come from something that's established under one goal. For us, climate is the through line of everything. Climate change is what is creating more invasive pest problems, more exotic pests that we have not seen on this continent or even in this hemisphere. They have reduced our chill hours. They have lengthened our pest seasons and the generations of pests that are coming. So climate for us is the platform and the through line to bring it all together. I did want to call out, because of the interest in soils, that we followed the UN's lead, because we had Dr. Kate Stowe, who's one of the co-authors of the UN's Below Ground Biodiversity Report, and we did one very specific to California and its 2,500 different soil types. One of the things that we've really focused on under SPM and all of our climate smart programs is making sure they're inclusive, that they have strong equity principles, and that they address not only the needs of the farmers and the landowners, those who are renters, those who are extremely small-scale farmers, as well as large-scale farmers, the communities, and especially our incumbent workforce, our farm workers. We also feel that as we focus on our Ag Vision goals for healthy communities, for local, resilient, and climate-smart food systems, and next-generation talent and tools, we must invest in our incumbent workforce as they start to age out, to be able to move up into some of the systems where they could be the new scouts out there in our fields. They can be the ones that are operating the autonomous weeders from an iPad at the end of the field. So we're making significant investments in that workforce through the Ag Step program, through community colleges with a curriculum that they can take at their own pace, remotely or on a community college campus, and get certifications in 12 different units that are mobile that they could take with them to other positions. I think it's a very important piece when we talk holistically about the changes that are needed. Everyone in our workforce, just like it is in the Food Safety Modernization Act, has to be a part of feeling ownership for that and the culture change that goes along with that. I also think the technology and the innovation, in addition to being a part of a meaningful career in agriculture to grow food and healthy food for people, is one of our best tools for recruiting young people into agriculture. Our UCA and our IPM program continues to be a very strong backbone of the work that we do. We have a lot of information about the other pests that we have been able to adapt sterile insect technology for. Mating disruption is an important part of our public programs, as well as it is for our farmers and our ranchers. But there are several issues that are driving a lot of our changes. One is resistance. As we take away more tools, we become almost too dependent on some. We're also finding that while we want to get rid of the high priority and high risk pesticides, sometimes we need that for knockdown if we're not successful in doing our trapping, our exclusion work at the borders, the rapid response. Sometimes we have to do a knockdown, which is also part of IPM if the other systems aren't working. And we've had a lot of experience in that. I know I've talked fast and a lot, but there's really good presenters. I've seen their slides. I just wanted to give kind of that big picture framework, Larry, for where our policies are coming from and to provide resources of what we're trying to do with our industry partners by aligning the California State University system with 23 campuses, our UC system with 10 campuses and cooperative extension, the public sector and community colleges, as well as Western growers on behalf of industry, to really outline these are our 10-year needs in research. That takes nothing away from the long-term research goals. These are what we see as the most crucial for us at a very critical time in agriculture. And just yesterday, we released our California Climate Resiliency Strategy for Agriculture, and I encourage everyone to take a look at that as well. Thanks for the time and the opportunity, and it's a pleasure to be on the panel with these very esteemed panelists. Thanks, Larry.
Thanks very much, Karen. I really appreciate the comprehensive view you gave both of the challenges that you all are facing, obviously the diversity of California agriculture, the resources you have, and a lot of the solutions. So I have about 40 questions for you, but rather than dwell on those, let's turn it over to Shane now, who is with Sysco. And Shane, take it away.
Right. Thank you. Anyway, I want to spend just a few minutes on about 10 slides, so I have a few more. But I'm going to talk about the IPM program that Sysco put together many years ago and where we're going with it and what we've seen. It's really kind of the most established sustainable ag program in food service. We started out with canned and frozen over 20 years ago, specifically with an IPM focus. It has kind of morphed into a sustainability program now, but IPM is the core of it. We've moved into fresh produce about 3 years ago into 17 categories. So not only are we doing canned and frozen, but we now have fresh. So if you think about it, you could have the product in any different style, canned, frozen, or fresh, and it's all under the IPM program. Our potato program is under the Potato Sustainability Alliance. I just want to call that out. That's a group that formed along with us and McDonald's and the processors in the Northwest, Midwest, and Canada. And that is a group that just focuses on potatoes, and it's very IPM specific too. That is one of their key pillars. So our program is really IPM centric, and I'm going to go into a little bit more detail. Next slide, please. If you don't know who Sysco is, most of us know by the upper left, the Sysco name and all the trucks on the road. We have a lot of different subsidiaries that we put together. Sysco will visit a restaurant a couple times a week, and they'll bring everything they need. Sigma is more specific to what we say QSRs, like Whitney's or something like that, where they tell us what to bring to them. Greco is an Italian chain where we bring sausage and pizza boxes and all that. So there's a lot of diversity in the markets we service and how we do it. You see the Fresh Point logo over on the left-hand side. We are the largest produce distributor in the US. That's where I spend a lot of my time, is on the Fresh Point side, and then also on the procurement side in our Salinas produce office in where we have our buying group. Edward Don is equipment and supplies. Buckhead is an area that I don't get involved with. It's all meat. And so seafood, meat, cuttings, portion-sized steaks. European imports is specialty items, usually from Europe, chocolates, oils, all kinds of unique things that a chef may want. Asian foods is the Asian focus, similar to some of our other specialty companies. So you put that all together. Next slide, please. And what you'll see is we're a very large food service distributor. We're known as the largest. We're doing about 81 billion in sales. We have 337 distribution facilities, and it's not just in the US, we are over in Europe now too. 60% of our volume and our sales goes into the restaurants, but you can also see healthcare, travel, education, and other. We do get into some retail. So we've got a pretty good footprint out there. The real thing is our mission and our purpose is really connecting people to grow and share food with one another. Next slide, please. That's enough about Sysco. So how do we get into this? Really, the suppliers and our growers benefit from this program. I'll get into a little bit more about how they benefit, but the program really is a focus on not only pesticide, but fertilizer use too. We have a science-based foundation. We don't like to speculate. We like to look at what the science is telling us. We do promote alternative energy sources, water conservation, obviously an issue in California. Reuse and recycling across the board are some of the other pillars that we're doing. So it's not just IPM, we're putting it together as a whole package. Next slide, please. The history, we started before 2000 looking at IPM. Back then, we didn't even know what sustainability was. It was a new word and people weren't even sure they wanted to use it yet or not. But over the years, we've progressed the program, matured it, collected more and more information. And I just want to let you see that this isn't something we just started last year. We have been committed to this and part of the program for quite a while. Next slide, please. The program's really two parts right now. The first one is the Sysco Sustainable Ag IPM program. That's our canned and frozen program. That's the one we first started. We basically asked the supplier who represents their growers to write a program for us. We have a third-party assessment. And then the key is once a year, we ask the supplier to provide the application results back to us so we can put it all together and see how we're doing. You can say you have a great program, but you got to get some feedback. The second part of this program is what we recently did, and we transitioned the IPM program with the help of the IPM Institute in North America. And they partnered with Primus and a company called Azul, which is a database. And they took the standard, got other people in industry involved in it, and made it called the sustainability standard. It's pretty much the same thing as the IPM program, but now they've got a standard that's independent and other retailers and people out there can use it. So now there's some efficiencies for the grower, for the processors to join the program, because you can not only use it for us, but you can use it for other large customers out there too. So we try and streamline it to take some of the burden out. Okay, next one, please. overview of what it is. You can see the big green area. That's the IPM and nutrient management portion of the audit or the assessment. But you'll see a lot of other things in here too. Waste and recycling, energy conservation, water conservation. You will see the blue slice down there. It says worker safety and welfare. I think you're going to see more of that being pulled out of the sustainability standards and moved into social responsibility standards that we're seeing more and more of large buyers get into. So there will be some adjustment, and I think you're going to see more of it as an environmental IPM standard moving forward. Next slide, please. The environmental indicator report, I'm going to breeze through this fairly quickly. This is what the suppliers report back to us, and we ask them to report back to us their pesticide use. Not a problem for California because you guys already require it. Bigger problem in other states, and that's where there's sometimes a little pushback, but we're consistent, and we find the growers and suppliers, once they do it the first year, it's easier the second year and years after that. By capturing this information, we can measure the program. You can see how the acres in our program continue to grow as we grow and add more into the program. But you can also see it comes and goes. The blue on top is the additional acreage that the suppliers say we are impacting. So we're not only impacting our Sysco production, we're impacting all production. And that's what we're trying to do. It's not just for Sysco, but for everybody to come up into IPM and adopt the program. Thank you. Next slide, please. We look at the pesticide use avoided and what strategies are being successful. Obviously, the crop rotation is the biggest one from year to year, but you can see it changes too. Beneficials were smaller and they're getting to be a greater impact. And remember, this is across all commodities. So it goes from onions to leafy greens to peppers and all that. But I'm not going to drain this slide, but it gives you an idea that we are tracking this. We're seeing where the avoidance is, and we do report out that our suppliers avoided X amount of pounds of pesticides by using IPM techniques and programs. Next slide, please. This is a very interesting one because this is total pesticide use by toxicity as our suppliers have reported back to us. From 21 to 24, you can see a pretty darn good reduction in pesticide use, yet the suppliers remained about the same. Also, the pesticide use of lower toxicities is improving. And you would think we'd go out and promote this and tell you all kinds of great stories. But if I put the other 10 years on here, you would see that this actually went up and now is coming back down. And that to me tells me the IPM program's working because 3 years ago, it was extremely wet. The Northwest had a lot of extra water. Potatoes, leafy greens, and everything had a lot more insect pressure and different things going on. We also saw some regulatory changes in here, but having the data doesn't mean we're going to go out and just promote it. It shows that we are successful from year to year. And our biggest challenge is when we go from a low year to a big year, how do we report that in our reporting? Because the people at Sysco don't like to report an increase, they like to report the decreases. But in reality, some years we go up. And we've been telling them that for many years. It goes up and down based on the effectiveness of the program. But some very encouraging results. Next one, please. Now, when you get some encouraging results, sometimes you see something that's going to take some more investigation. This is tomatoes. Tomatoes, for some reason, we're seeing an increase in pesticide use. And it's not only in canned and frozen, but now that we're doing fresh, we can pull that out and look at it. Some of this may be that we're getting additional reporting in fresh because it's a newer program, but it shows an area or a specific commodity that maybe we want to take a deeper dive in, and our data can point us in those directions. Next one, please. So there's a lot of value that comes from our IPM programs, our sustainable programs. It puts us in a leadership position, really. Um, we're the only one in food service and even in retail. We get a lot of traction out of this program because it is successful. We have engaged with growers and the suppliers and really tried to promote it and be part of the community. We want to do the agricultural sustainability right. It really facilitates industry alignment, accepting these third-party audits and being able to share them. I think in the sustainability standard is recognized by is one of the 7 certificates now recognized by the major retailers and us. It really documents the sustainability metrics, and by collecting the data, we can see what our information's telling us, as I just showed in those last couple slides. And we've really provided an excellent level of support to our suppliers. If our supplier calls the IPM Institute for help, they'll pick up the phone, they're going to answer the questions, and we're going to get them answered and get you moved on to what you need to do. We're not going to call you back a week later and do that. So you got to have that support. And what we're seeing is it motivates other companies in the industry to develop and build their own sustainability programs. Now that we have one, we see our competitors just trying to put one together, or even friends in the marketplace that want to maybe latch onto our program and duplicate it, which we promote and share with others out there if they wanted the advice and the help to get started. Next slide, please. So with that was a very quick overview of the Sysco IPM program, canned and frozen. This is a lettuce field out in Southern California in the desert region. And this is one of our field inspectors that actually goes out in the fields every morning and tells them if they're going to pack for Sysco or not. So we are in the fields, we work with the harvesters, we work with the growers, the different regions, soil contents and all that. So we're not just a distributor, we try to get involved all the way down to the dirt. Thank you very much, Larry and everybody, for listening to me. I'm going to go ahead and let the next person get started.
Well, thanks very much, Shane. I really appreciate that. I did not know the extent that you all were involved, both on the processing and the fresh side. And your point about IPM programs varying from year to year, that's the way they should operate. If they're looking at field conditions and needs, that's going to be different from year to year. So I really appreciate that. Katherine, let's just turn to you. I have been continued to be impressed by everything that USB has been doing and your role in it. So I look forward to your presentation.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Larry. That was very kind, but really glad to be here. Glad to be here with this group of panelists and have this conversation. Like Larry said, I'm with the United Soybean Board, or the Soy Checkoff, and I'm going to bring a slightly different perspective to this conversation for a couple of different reasons. One, we're going to talk about soybeans row crops, which is different than what we just heard from our last 2 presenters. And then the second piece of this, so you've heard policy, you've heard supply chain. Now we're going to talk about, the actual farmer. What does this look like from the farmer side and from an organization that is funded by farmers and accountable to farmers? And so my goal here is by no means to redefine IPM for this group. You're the experts there. I'm just here to kind of connect what you already know with how it shows up in farmer decisions and where there might be gaps between how we talk about it and how it actually gets adopted. And so my hope is to kind of do 3 things through the 10-ish minutes that I have this afternoon. So first is really ground this in how IPM shows up in farmer decisions. Second is to share what we're seeing in terms of where there's potential opportunity to evolve and some of the things that USB and the Soy Checkoff is investing in. And then finally, close with a couple implications for how we think about scaling these new opportunities and new innovations. So next slide. So just to start with a little bit of context on for those of you that are not familiar with the United Soybean Board or the Soy Checkoff and what that is and what we represent, because I think this really shapes kind of the lens at which I look at IPM. And so The checkoff, a quick primer on how checkoffs work. And in the case of soybeans, every time a bushel of soybeans is sold in the US, 0.5% of the selling price goes into a pool per se, that's managed by the soy checkoff. And we're allowed to invest in research, education, and market development, or you could call that promotion, on behalf of US soybean farmers. So the soy checkoff is farmer funded and farmer directors. Farmer elected board members are the ones that set the priorities. Farmers are the ones that are making those decisions. It's farmers that are pooling their dollars to collectively do what none of them could do alone. And I say this because that goal matters. Farmers aren't just putting money into the checkoff out of goodwill, right? This is an investment and they're expecting a return back to their operations. So when an organization like the Soy Checkoff invests in IPM related research, that's farmers deciding that their own money should go there. It's not a mandate from a buyer, or it's not a grant requirement. It's a signal of what farmers believe they need to stay viable. And I think that's a different kind of commitment. And I think that's worth calling out. So as we talk about the farmer and what this investment actually looks like in practice, I'm going to bring it to the farm level because that's why Larry asked me to be a part of this. And this picture was actually taken this weekend, and this is actually my dad. And if you look really closely in that picture, you see a little one, and that's one of my little boys riding with his papa. And so we were at the farm this weekend, and I decided to do a little test. And asked my dad a couple questions. And so the first one I asked was, I said, "Hey, Daddy, do you have a formal integrated pest management program?" And of course, he looked at me and he kind of like shook his head and he was like, I don't know, ish, maybe, no. But he didn't really know how to answer that question or what I call it or what to call it. And so then I asked him a couple of different questions. I said, "Well, do you scout before you spray?" He was like, "Yeah, obviously." "Do you rotate modes of action?" "Of course, I have to." "Do you use cover crops to suppress weeds?" "Well, yes." So he's doing IPM. He just doesn't call it that, and he's not alone. Many other practices, and especially some of our older practices, are there, and even some of the more innovative practices are there. But farmers don't think about it as officially doing IPM, right? They're doing good farming practices. And I call that out because I think it shapes how research gets communicated, how these new innovative tools get designed, and ultimately how adoption actually happens at scale. And if we want more farmers doing different things, then we have to meet them where we already are. So next slide. So to take this just one step further and kind of dig into the soy checkoff research portfolio or USB's portfolio, if you ask any United Soybean Board member or farmer leader what we're funding in the IPM space right now, a lot of them would probably say nothing. And that's not because the work isn't there, but it's because none of these projects have the word integrated pest management in the title. But look at this portfolio. We have disease forecasting and tracking. We have understanding pest populations and cover crops. We have work with biologicals, weed image mapping, resistance mapping, understanding the sequences and weed genomes, scouting decision tools, how stink bug behavior is shifting with changing weather patterns, what's happening with emerging diseases. In a very specific example, looking at red crown rot, which is a new emerging disease in the Midwest. New management strategies for new insect pests like soybean gall midge, gene discovery to combat soybean cyst nematode. This is an IPM portfolio. Farmers funded it because these problems are costing them yield and margin, not because someone told them that they had to invest in integrated pest management. And so this list of projects that kind of I just named is by no means exclusive. It's just I wanted to give this group a flavor of some of the things that farmers are investing in because this commitment is real. It's farmer driven, and even though it doesn't always come with the label you expect, it's there. And so we'll go to the next slide. So when you look at this portfolio, something else becomes clear, and Lakeisha hit on this in her opening comments. This is not one discipline. While IPM evolved out of the insect and entomology space, and that work is incredibly important, it matters. Farmers don't farm in silos, and we've got to talk about IPM across weeds and diseases and insects and nematodes. They're all interacting across pests, but also across crops and across seasons. So a cover crop that suppresses weeds might host nematodes in that next year's soybean crop. A fungicide decision a fungicide decision this year affects resistance dynamics next year. The systems don't care how we've organized our research. And so I think it's really important to call out, and I think this is one of the exciting things about the work that FAR is doing, is that when we talk about IPM research, we have to shift towards a more systems-based thinking. I think the IPM community, weed scientists and entomologists and plant pathologists and nematologists all have to talk across boundaries more than it does today because farmers are managing all of this together. They don't have the luxury of staying in their lane. So, kind of speaking of systems, we'll go to the next slide. And speaking of systems and every things interacting, the system that farmers are working in and under is under extreme pressure, and most of you on this call know that, right? You could name a number of different things: 50 plus weed species with confirmed herbicide resistance, fungicide and insecticide resistance growing rapidly, a regulatory environment that's shrinking the toolbox faster than new options are coming in. Input costs have grown up incredibly and not come back down, and demand signals shift shift faster than a farmer can make decisions within a single system. And none of these challenges are independent. They're part of this connected system, and they're connected in ways that we don't always talk about. One of those I'll call out here is in the herbicide space and weed management space. Herbicide programs are under real pressure right now. And those are the same programs that make no-till and cover crop operationally viable. If we lose those herbicides, then we lose those sustainability programs because farmers will have to till to control those weeds. And when farmers till, the conservation gains that everyone in the supply chain is counting on, the soil health, the carbon, the water quality, all of those start to unravel. And so this is where I think it's really important that we're having this conversation that FAR is teed up, and where I think IPM matters most, not just as this pest management framework, but as the connective tissue between farm profitability and the conservation outcomes everyone in this room cares about. If we can protect the tools that those sustainability practices are built on, then we protect the practices themselves. And so that's kind of the systems argument that I'm making. And one of the things that I think we have to do differently and do better. And I think it's something that we can't afford to think about in isolation. So we'll go to the next slide. Talking about, financial and environmental resiliency and thinking about the whole system, I think something else becomes really clear is that the financial and environmental sides of this are not a trade-off. They're not a sequence between where one comes before the other. For farmers, they're the same thing. A farm that can't make money can't invest in better practices. A farm that depletes its soils or its water or its pest management tools won't be viable long-term either. And so these are not competing priorities. They reinforce each other. And Lakeisha teed this up as well. IPM is where those two things connect. If we reduce unnecessary inputs, we protect margin. If we preserve modes of action that are still working, we protect future options. If we take care of the land, we protect that farmer's asset. And so none of this is sustainability just for a label. It's what farmers consider just good farming, right? And it's exactly why farmers have been investing checkoff dollars in the types of projects that I showed you earlier, even if they don't label it as IPM per se. So next slide. So kind of to wrap this up, I think one of the things that I spend a lot of time thinking about is how do we make new innovative practices scale? And I think this is especially important to call out on this panel today because we've got supply chain partners here, we've got policy partners here. And so, as we think about how farmers steward their land and why they steward their land because it's their livelihood. Most of them have a generational relationship with it. You saw, my dad isn't just farming to maximize this season's margin. That's incredibly important, but he's farming so my boys have something to come back to as well. They are not waiting to be convinced to take care of their land, but stewardship and solvency have to go together. And when you start talking about carbon markets or ecosystem services or sustainability premiums from buyers, these are all legitimate mechanisms for compensating farmers for the cost they take on and the practices they adopt. And I think it's exciting that we're having those conversations. But even within these conversations, I think the honest challenge is those incentives have to actually reach the farm. Too often that value gets caught up in that long supply chain, whether it's transaction cost or aggregator margins or program administrations. And so farmers end up bearing the cost and the risk while the financial benefit ultimately lands somewhere else in the supply chain. Farmers will adopt new practices, Farmers will change their operations, they'll change the things they're doing, but they have to be compensated for that if it's truly going to increase their risk. And so, as we talk about IPM and how IPM becomes an important piece of ecosystem services, or potential piece of ecosystem services, or a potential piece of these potential supply chain premiums, and I think we've got to acknowledge how we ensure that those additional dollars make it back to the farm. Because if the economics don't work at the farm level, then the practices will not scale. So just to close, we'll do one final slide. Um, I think farmers are here at the table. Farmers are investing in this and will continue to invest in this space. They continue want to make innovative changes on their farm. But the exciting piece of this conversation is when all of these parties come together, when we have policymakers and supply chain partners and farmers, and government granting entities like FAR at the table working together to really think about what's needed and where do we go next. And so incredibly excited about this conversation and looking forward to the discussion in a little bit, Larry. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Katherine. You remind me, excuse me, of what my board chair used to say, which was all ethics start after breakfast, which seemed to make a lot of sense to me. I also appreciate what you noted about IPM. I've often thought when people try to measure how much IPM is out there, you can get people to fill out a survey, but if give me 5 minutes to ask a farmer about what that farmer does or doesn't do, and then you'll know whether they actually have an IPM program. So those are really good points. Todd, I look forward to hearing what you have to say. Just always been impressed with the work you've done, and I've been glad to be actually a beneficiary of some of it. So Todd, let me turn it over to you.
Well, there's always a danger in batting cleanup, right? Because everybody in front of you has an opportunity to steal your thunder. So we'll start out by totally endorsing what everybody else before me has said already. And so, anyway, so I thought I'd try and take a slightly different angle here than what I was guessing that the other speakers would talk about. So anyway, I thought it'd be very subtle in my message in terms of the title of my presentation. Nestle needs IPM. And so, sorry for the picture. Obviously, you're looking at going Central and West Africa region. Well, I took that picture a few years ago. I didn't take the picture out in front of our building, but I took the picture in front of another building half the world away. But anyway, that's also represents where Nestle is. I mean, so it's not, these challenges I'm going to talk about are not just here in the United States. They are globally. Anywhere you go and talk with growers, they're pretty much all the same focus, the same concerns. Preserving the farm, next generation. The weather, all those, it's universal. It really is. So next slide. So what I want to talk about really is resiliency in the supply chain. And what we're really focusing on here is really ensuring supply as representing a processor of many different brands across the whole globe. Think back in the not so distant past, COVID taught the whole food industry a hard lesson. This concept called business continuity plans, or BCPs, back then before COVID, it really was a quickly forgotten paper exercise. You did it because you wrote something down But during COVID, and certainly after COVID, it has really become a significant part of every manufacturing plan. What's Plan B? And with that in mind, I mean, our bottom line is we as a food manufacturer, we need predictable quantities and qualities. Even regarding, and we won't debate climate change, but certainly we can talk about extreme weather impacts. Just before, at the beginning of the call, we were talking about how hot and dry it is out in California, and my comment about it's supposed to snow here in Michigan in a couple days. The weather is certainly a challenging part of producing food, and that has not changed. A couple of the other presenters also talked about new pest challenges, whether that's a new invasive species or resistant strains of current pests. They both are very challenging. But through it all, go back to the header there. Food manufacturers need predictable quantities and qualities. You know, if we can't buy it, we can't sell it. We need to keep the factories running. So that really, what we've seen is we're really trying to integrate a very seamless supply chain and integrating IPM through that supply chain. So at the bottom there, really ensuring the steady source of compliant ingredients is a major challenge. And I want to highlight the word compliant. So, okay, while the definition of compliant may differ within the Nestle family, and there's 3 different brands there, whether it's Gerber's or it's Jack's Pizzas or Purina, and depending on the consumer, we all have quality limits that must be achieved. There again, infant foods for Gerber from Gerber's for children. So think a 6-month-old versus Jack's Pizza, which there again, my college-aged son swears that Jack's Pizza is one of the 5 major food groups, to Purina and the needs of our cat. Okay, they're all important. They all have focus. All have needs for quality, but they can be slightly different depending on the product. Next slide. So I'm going to use the word foundational, and every single one of those speakers before me said it without saying that word, but IPM is the basis. Larry and I have been around long enough to know that IPM has been foundational. I keep coming back to that word. Foundational in terms of pest management, foundational in terms of pesticide usage, foundational in terms of basic quality of products or ingredients. But from our perspective, that really kind of goes beyond that today. Not only those aspects are still very important, but yes, pesticide residues certainly are important, especially in the Gerber side of the business. But things like mycotoxins seem to be a more and more of a challenge, certainly here in the United States, much less across the Nestle globe. All those principles that go into pest management, go into disease management, understanding the pest, understanding the crop, the timing, all those principles go into managing mycotoxins. If you talk to my friends in Purina, mycotoxins are a big deal for them, just about as big a deal as they are for Gerber. But then you also have things like toxic weed seeds there. I got a picture of kind of on the top left there. It's peas in the pod, but it's nightshade berries right underneath. They look a lot alike, especially even with color sorters. But one is very healthy for you, the other is not. And so we have to continue to focus on that as well. There are integrated pest management principles that go into trying to control those contaminant issues as well. So from an IPM standpoint, really, those principles we're trying to embed them upstream as much as possible to the field and orchard level. The challenge comes maybe more on the Purina side, where you're dealing with more of a commodity, versus the Gerber side, pears, and literally, just a few miles down the road for specific block of pears. But the principles are the same, and we really need to hardwire those principles into basically how we assess what our growers are doing, the production systems that all the other supply speakers talked about, but not only our growers, our direct growers, but also our ingredient suppliers, whoever they may be. Next slide. Changing gears here a little bit. Yeah, I mean, like everybody else, we've been very much involved with IPM for quite a while. Go back to Gerber's funded the Michigan Pear IPM program in 1979. It's a little later than say what Steve Balling was doing at Randall Island out in California about that same time. But still, I mean, we've been in that business. We've been in that arena for quite some time and continue to fund that research. Why? Because our growers needed those solutions. And yes, it is not only is it connected to our region ag programs, it's integral. So especially in the specialty crops, you can't talk about biodiversity and managing biodiversity without using IPM somewhere in the sentence. So it is integral. It is foundational. It is there again, the whole system approach, absolutely. Well, certainly IPM programs are very contextual. It's really it comes down to case by case, orchard block by orchard block, or field by field. You also are trying to look at what else is going on in that orchard block. Not only just are you trying to control, cotton moth, but you need to understand what your beneficials are doing. You need to understand, what the timing of the crop is doing. So all these integrated pest management principles that have been, been around for a number of years are totally hardwired into any of our region ag programs today. There again, the benefits, whether we're talking sustainability or resiliency in these orchards, reducing the pesticide residues, preserving the tools in the grower's toolbox. IPM, it's right there. It's got to be part of the conversation. Next slide. And so basically, just kind of wrapping it up for us, Nestle needs IPM. There you go. No, actually, there again, ensuring that steady source of compliant ingredients is a major challenge for any food processor, any food manufacturer. We see it as there again. It is integral. It is a critical part of our quality programs upstream, definitely. And then there again, we're working closely with our growers, with our suppliers, and are committed to embracing it both now and in the future. There you go. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Todd. I really appreciate it. And I've seen an awful lot of the work you all have done, and it's very impressive. Let me just give an opportunity for the panelists here, and we'll get into other questions that I think Tien is compiling. Do any of you have questions for each other, or things you need to either clarify or refute based on the presentations you've seen so far?
Me?
Sure.
This is really a comment and a question, but I agree completely with Katherine about the work that is happening doesn't always fit the descriptor that we all like to use, and that the farmer feels like, are you moving the goalpost again every time we come up with a new phrase? It was IPM for years, and now we're doing sustainable pest management. It was all about healthy soils and being carbon farmers, and now it's about regenerative ag, and everybody's at the farm level is like, I'm doing all this stuff. It would be really great if we could all have the shared lexicon and perhaps use that in a way to better communicate what's actually happening in our fields and orchards and pastures to consumers. Because we also, some of it's driven by the food system, and I will call it trends as we see them, and they're all legitimate. But to make this a shared vocabulary and a shared conversation of the goals that we're all trying to accomplish together, I think we have to really think intentionally about the vocabulary and the lexicon of the words that we use.
Well, Karen, based on that, how do you see, in one way or another, all of you raised the issue of the value of these programs. How do you, and Katherine, maybe more explicitly, how do we make sure that the value of these programs is shared throughout the supply chain, as well as the costs of implementing them?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. That's actually was going to be my question for Todd and Shane, to talk a little bit more about how growers interact within the programs, and is there a cost to the grower to participate? Those audits, is that on the grower? Is that part of Nestle or Sysco? Could you talk a little bit more about that in your two specific programs?
Yeah, if I could jump in, I could probably help with that. Is the expectation for the grower is to participate in the assessment. The assessment is executed at the supplier level. So if it's a grower shipper, they're going to have 15, 20 different growers out there, and the assessment will rotate every 3 years. It's a whole program to it, but the cost of that is on the supplier and how they deal with that. And those assessments are a couple $1,000s. You see them also on food safety, and we're seeing more on social responsibility. What do you get for that on the back end is we have recently attributed our products under these programs as a environmental sustainable product as are produced under that. So now we've got something flagged with those items so a customer can go in and choose them. And what that's helped with us is that now we can track, and we're seeing those programs that have the IPM sustainable standard are selling more than conventional. So we're seeing a little bit of a consumer preference there. And by being part of the program, it helps streamline those products through the supply chain at a little bit higher demand is what we hope for. But we try, the biggest burden on this for the grower is the time, the documentation, and those assessments. We recognize that. That's why we moved to the sustainable standards so that hopefully they can do one assessment, share it with many buyers, and reduce that burden. We've seen this happen in food safety over the years. We're trying to get ahead of it on the sustainability side.
And for the growers participating in those programs, is it a pure market access opportunity, or are there any other ways that those growers are compensated for the practices that they may incorporate or the additional time that they put into these assessments and these audits?
Yeah, we provide background training, the resources the best we can. We point them towards various USDA, the regional places. It's not that I'm not going to say we pay more for the crop compared to our contract, but it is another one of those programs that adds a value to that. And to be honest with you, there's a prestige sometimes when you're packing Sysco brand for us, and some suppliers like to do that with their growers because they know the good growers are the ones that are going to be able to do that, and it highlights their product. So it's a community in reality, because the growers work with the grower shipper who's communicating constantly with our merchandising group, and so the feedback on the purchase, fulfillment, and produce, because it's so highly volatile, is constant.
Could I make an observation? I think especially when you have highly perishable fresh, what really also is a big incentive is that growers also need certainty and the stability. I like being a preferred supplier is how I like to say it. I think there's a very important role for public dollars when public policy is helping to drive some of this change, to put some money in for incentives to help de-risk, to get that critical mass that will do this, that then peer-to-peer learning takes off. So I think it's a combination of that, but there'll never be enough public dollars to compensate for it, which is why the marketplace and the ultimate consumer all have to see value in it as well.
Good point.
But I appreciate what both of these companies are doing.
Yeah, that absolutely. Todd, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, it depends from our standpoint with the Nestle family. It depends on the crop, depends on the where it's going into. Pick on Purina, but Purina versus Gerber. I can speak specifically for the Gerber program. I mean, for our direct growers, primarily fruits and vegetables, but also some grains, we do have incentive programs. I mean, so yes, we are paying competitively, but if you're doing certain, basically have a laundry list and say, look, if you adopt mating disruption in your apples, okay, we will provide you an incentive payment for that. It's not going to save the farm. We refer to it as the nudge, right? If you were thinking about using it, it's the nudge to get you to pretty much covers the cost of trying to adopt that new project or program or practice. But to basically see if it'll work on your farm. I mean, we're not trying to be prescriptive, and that's a very important part of IPM. What works on your farm, what's going to work on your farm. I don't. And so, but here's a laundry list of practices we know work very well in an IPM program, pick something off the list and try it, and we'll be there to support you, and see if it fits in your situation.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense a lot. Let me just before we go to questions, if do we have any questions from in the chat? Okay, let me just before we do this, let me just take a slight shift on this, and let me just ask each of you, in terms of what you all are trying to get done in IPM, what can you think of? And obviously, you've got our whole research agenda, all of you do, but can you think of one or two things that are really critical for you right now, or particularly going forward in research relevant to IPM that really could take some serious attention right away? And a couple of you mentioned resistance, but that's only one of the issues.
Yeah. Pollinator health.
Seriously, yeah, of course, for you guys, yeah.
Emerging contaminants.
Yeah.
I'll say input cost. I mean, it's real.
It is real. Yep.
Very, very.
Yeah. What about you, Shane?
It's just the whole supply chain. It's I can't pick out one area over another because we work in so many geographic and different crops.
Yeah.
Asia is different than the U.S., is different than Africa. And it's just that's why we have to have an overreaching program that it's going to work for peppers or for all these different products. So the supplier tells us what they're doing because they're the expert, and we just verify that that's what they're doing.
So, Tian, do you want to at least bring up some of the questions that have come up in either the chat, I guess, in the chat?
Yeah, there are a couple. I think I'll pick and choose some that I think are most pertinent. So the first one is for Shane. How do you measure the amount of pesticide that a grower didn't use? How does the grower measure that?
They estimate it based on their history, because generally they have owned that farm for a long period of time, and they remember back in practices when they used maybe timing applications or something like that. If they change from one chemistry to another or another practice to another, then it's an estimation. It's not precise, but when you start putting thousands of growers together into that pool, all that variation seems to even out. And we look at it from year to year. So it's not by grower, but to grower.
Yeah, that makes sense. What else do you have, Tian?
This next one is for Todd. What water/irrigation sustainability standards and metrics does Sysco promote?
Well, Sysco would be Shane, but
That's
Oh,
Shane.
Shane.
yeah, just make Todd answer it anyway.
No, yeah.
How are we doing, Todd?
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Shane.
We don't have a water standard at this point. We have our the sustainability standard. I would encourage you to take a look at that and what it says about water conservation. And there's a few questions in there. I don't think you're going to find them overly burdensome, but making sure you use a good source of water, and if you are pulling specifically from some areas that's from ecological protected areas, making sure you're aware of those and you're not doing something with tail off water to harm those.
I bet. Someone also wanted to know the water and irrigation sustainability standards and metrics for Nestle as well.
Okay. Yeah. There again, Shane, you want to answer that one? Yeah, I mean, it's pretty similar. I mean, basically, we require our growers who are irrigating to monitor that amount of water. We're required for them to occasionally test the water, for different potential contaminants, to ensure that the water quality.
Yeah, there's a lot of water quality metrics around produce and what can be edible portion of the plant and what you can't.
Yep.
But it's and you put it all together. Water is so key to all of the growing. And food safety, we're even looking at that for how do we take all the water science and put it together so we come up with one standard that we could all use.
Good luck.
Yeah. Well, it's driven by the buyers. We might have a better chance at it.
We're trying to figure it out.
Yeah, they've got it all figured out in California. Just call.
No, but we do have a regulatory program for that. It's called Irrigated Ag Lands Regulatory Program. Yeah.
What else, Ian?
This next question is for Secretary Ross. Do you see any difference in grower uptake or motivation when the strategy is by crop versus by region or some combination?
We have had very good results, which is why I really stress the biologically integrated farming systems, which started out regionally or many small scale growers. And it was a way of supplementing cooperative extension at a time when we were really cutting back on cooperative extension. But the work of the specialists on campus was still the backbone to everything that we were trying to do. But we really saw significant changes start to happen when we did biologically integrated orchard systems, because then that was bringing together, like the Lodi Woodbridge Wine Grape Commission started out as being all about IPM and tailgating and lighthouse farms around vineyards. And they dramatically changed their pest management strategies, which then led to the basis of sustainable wine growing. When I was president of California Wine Grape Growers, because of FFRA being, see how long I've been around? Larry and I are the only two that have been around that long. We did our first ever crop pest risk profile to really understand our high risk pesticides. And that became the basis for working with Wine Institute on a statewide sustainable wine growing program. It all started with these pest issues because there are so many factors around that, but it was bringing a whole commodity together and with our processors in partnership to create the sustainable wine growing program, which now has a significant portion of the industry that's certified.
Thank you.
Yeah, the other thing I would add on that is that if you look at navel orangeworm, it's not just limited to one crop, and so
That's right.
So there are multiple pests like that are ingenious enough to decide to be over multiple crops that way.
And there's enough regional similarities to really bring together neighbors and area wide. In fact, my staff is really big on area wide approaches because of the complexity of some of these things at the local level.
Right. I am so sorry. What else, Tien?
This next question is, anyone can take it. It is, much of the emphasis is on bugs, weeds, and disease. Is there any effort to include vertebrate pests? And if so, what is it? And if not, why not?
We need gopher solutions for water use efficiency in our drip lines and subsurface. Man, please help me with gopher solutions.
I can say we use IPM programs in our distribution facilities specifically towards rats and other rodents. And we got tolerances, and I don't talk about it a lot, but we got to keep them out of our distribution facilities and out of the field. So yeah, we do have those programs.
Factories too, absolutely. I mean, those principles are applied everywhere. Yep.
We have a big issue, particularly in the southeast in soybeans with deer damage. Deer are a major pest. And so thinking about a systems-wide approach to combating that, which is very, very challenging. But it gets back to like making sure that the policy is in place in terms of population control at the state level and what that looks like. So, yes.
Looks like there was a follow-up question about what is a gopher? Do you mean pocket gopher, ground squirrels, or voles?
Yes, and all of the above. Anything that likes water, including coyotes. But that's a real hazard on the food safety side, as well as birds. As you know, you're standing in front of, it looks a nice picture of the lettuce field. Yeah, we have to really be very aware as we do our hazard assessment for that.
Right. So I have a question for you. I don't want to interrupt well, I actually do want to interrupt it. So the question in all of this is, if you're looking at this as a system, which I think all of you in one way or another kind of pointed out, if you're looking at the system, what ways do we have to actually provide, to actually evaluate or establish a value, either economic from the grower's point of view or throughout the supply chain? So And part of the reason I asked that question is you look at produce safety, for example, all of our programs that we thought were great conservation programs were suddenly thrown out because we were concerned about food safety. So now we're creating this plant-free zone around fields and things like that. So first of all, what research do we need in order to really establish value for this so it's recognized throughout the supply chain? Is that research or is it just coordination? And then how do we take that value that we establish for the supply chain and bring it back to the grower? And what research do we need to do that stuff?
Wow.
Yeah.
And what do you think about life just in general?
Yeah.
Well, look at the time.
Oh, sorry, I have to go.
We've established targets in our statewide scoping plan for natural working lands. Obviously, the intent is to try to create some way of recognizing the value of working lands in addition to keeping everything natural. And what it is helping us do is get recognition of the co-benefits that might come from doing IPM or doing water management. But it's also a big part of this will also be about the storage of carbon in the soils and all of the practices that help or negatively impact that. But it's a very significant question because many of our programs have to be based on quantifying something very specific. In the case of our Climate Smart Ag programs, we're funding those from the Greenhouse Gas Emission Reduction Fund. So that's why we measure it in CO2 equivalent savings on emissions. But we're getting and trying to find more ways of quantifying or getting public and perhaps financial recognition for the co-benefits because of the practices that are producing the specific thing that we're trying to measure. It's a hugely important question for all of us in society as we think about policies or ballot measures, because we do have a cottage industry called the initiative process. So I think it'd be tremendously helpful to get big thinkers on that kind of thing.
Yeah, I agree. Anyone else? But one of the reasons I think that's really important, Karen, is that, and I've always used this example, let's say you go to a lender and you talk about what your program is. If you're using a good IPM program, I think it's at least substantial evidence of being a smart manager, of being able to be flexible to deal with changing conditions. So if we can actually decide on, or at least provide a value for that, I think it helps farmers in getting their loans. It may help them with programs like Todd's, and it may also be valuable for ecosystem services. So being able to describe that in a way that makes sense would be useful. And if it's useful in those cases, then it's useful to the farmer as well.
It's useful, but do you need certification is always going to be a question. That's where I think the companies like the two here are the proxies that I have. Like I have a contract, I have a sale, and part of my sale is based on these practices so they can see the totality of good farming practices. Yeah.
So Tien, I see we have 5 minutes left. Maybe we should wrap this up. Or else, if y'all just want to stay on, I'll order out. We can sit around and talk some more. I mean, it's really whatever works for you.
Yeah. I think we have time for one more question, and I think this question is a good one to end on. It's what emerging areas of IPM research are the speakers most excited about, and which have the greatest potential to increase adoption?
That's a good question.
I'll be very quick. Biologicals for all of our various crops. I took a group as one of my Climate Smart Ag delegations to Brazil this year, and I'm embarrassed at how far advanced they are in the actual, not only finding solutions, but the adoption by farmers. The companies that are part of this are themselves providing a tremendous amount of the technical assistance on that. And it is a high, high priority for Western growers and all of us here on the West because of all the public policy measures and regulatory measures and food safety measures that we've talked about today.
I'll second that one because from a food safety standpoint, especially in our infant nutrition, residues, right? And so trying to get the residues out, understanding, pest complexes. We talked about resistance. Biologicals is definitely the exciting area
Yeah.
right now. Yep.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge, Larry, is we trial them like they're going to be a one-for-one substitute, and then the adoption we think will work the same way. And this is an investment in the whole system to really make the adoption work, because they're integrated into the whole system, but they're valuable, and in some cases they will be the replacement. So I think it's really important from the first to understand not just what the answer is, it's the adoption and integrating it in the appropriate way, starting with the trial work itself.
Right,
Because
right.
the first generation of biologicals out here was not very successful. It's got a bad rap.
Right, right. And you made the point also about having the ability in a dire situation to be able to knock back a
And
population.
sometimes you just have to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 So
Katherine?
far.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
far.
exactly. Yeah.
And I'll piggyback on that because this is a little bit I think that comment connects back to what I was thinking. And that's moving from managing at a field or acre level down to individual, more targeted management. I think that the technology and also the potential products are allowing us to start moving there. We're not there yet, but that's one of the things that I'm excited about. And I think that very much connects back to biologicals and how we think about them. They probably are not going to be a complete blanket. They work on every acre across my entire farm, but there's going to be specific cases and areas where they are very impactful. And so the ability to be able to target certain areas and understand how we manage different, very small areas differently than other areas, I think will be really important moving forward. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, for me, it's all about the technology. I'm excited about what they're doing on targeting weed removal in different rows, scouting, drones.
Yes.
I mean, the technology, I think we're just getting there. And the more we can take the burden off the grower to get the technology to do the work and provide even more data back to them on the success of that, I think we're going to drive it a lot further too.
Yeah.
In addition to the biologicals and everything else people said.
Definitely. Yeah, the technology is exciting.
Yeah. Well, thank you to all of you. I'd love to. Well, I plan to have further conversations with all of you. Look forward to it. But thank you for taking the time on this. Tien, do we have a couple of housekeeping things that we need to go over here right at the end? So I don't know how my email got put on there, but you can contact me. I've got the home phone numbers for everybody else on here. You just call me for that. This is going to be distributed to all the registrant people who've registered for the event. Will it be also posted on a landing page as well, Tien, or not?
Yeah, this recording will be posted on the FFAR webpage for this webinar.
That sounds great. All right. Well, thank you very much. It's great to see all of you. Have a great weekend, a great Easter, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye,
See
all.
you.
Thank you, Larry.